Hi, welcome back. Previously, we discussed npm and how to install and update and remove packages. In this video, we will explore the package.json file. The package.json file is a metadata for Node.js projects containing various required configurations and dependencies. It provides essential information about the project, including its name, version, dependencies, scripts, and more. Now, let's look at some of the essential fields in a package.json file. All right, so we are going to move to VS Code, and I will demonstrate from there the different essential fields that we can add to the package.json file. So let's get there. All right, here we are in VS Code, and we have created a package.json file already from our previous demos. So we're going to continue making use of this one, and from here, I'm going to explain the different fields that can be added into this package.json field. So first, we have the name field. So the name field here basically specifies the name of the package that we are trying to create. So every module or every project that we build with Node.js can be converted into a package and be uploaded into the public repository or npm, where other people can download it and use it in their projects. So the name field basically specifies the name of that particular package that you might want to create. All right, so next we have the version. So version here specifies the current version of the project. As you make changes to the package, you can update the versioning. Now, the versioning here makes use of the semantic versioning system. You can read more about that. I will add a link to the description below so that you can learn more about semantic versioning. Next, we have description. So the description here basically describes the project that you're creating or the package that you're creating. It gives a detailed information about what the package does and maybe how users can make use of the package in their projects. Okay, so all of that information goes under description. And next, here we have main. So the main here basically specifies the entry point for Node.js. So whenever you want to run this project or whenever you install this package, the first file that Node.js is going to look into to run the package is going to be specified under main. And as you can see, for example, here we specified this index.js that we created here that contains our hello world application. Next, we have the script property, which defines custom scripts that can be executed using npm run. For example, we have test and start. So the test is going to be run whenever we use the npm run test. And also the start is going to be executed whenever we use npm run start. For example, I can use the terminal here to say npm run start. And that is obviously going to execute this code and print out the console.log that we have here. Next, we have keywords, which provides an array of keywords that describes the package. So for example, we can add keywords here for better SEO that basically describes what the package is all about. So here we can say this package is about hello. Sorry, this would be an array. Hello world first app in Node. Okay, so we can continue adding as many keywords as possible that basically describes what the package is all about. We also have the author property, which specifies the author of the package. So for example, here we have author, and of course it's my name, and it basically describes the person that owns this package. Next, we have license. So the license property specifies the license under which the package is distributed. As I explained before, this package is distributed under ISC. So we basically have different licenses. We have the IMT, we have ISC, as you can see, and you can read more about other licenses that are available. Next, the dependency and dev dependency list basically lists the dependencies required for the project. So dependencies listed under dependencies are required for production, while those listed under dev dependencies are only needed for development. So let's take a look at how this works. Okay, so next we can have dependency right here. Let's give this quote, dependencies. And of course, it is an object that takes in lots of dependencies. So we are going to add dependencies here as we progress. But for now, let's also add dev dependency. So the dev dependencies, as discussed before, list different packages that are going to be used on development. So we can add nodemon, for example, nodemon, and of course specify the version right here. All right. Okay, so we can add dependencies manually like this, assuming we know the dependencies and also the versioning numbers, or we can use the npm install command to add different dependencies that we might want to use on this project. So let's try that. For example, we can add Express to this project. Let's do npm install Express. All right, so that's going to run some code, and at the end, we are going to see a dependency added under this dependency here. So I'll close this and open it again, and there we have it. So we have Express added as one of the production dependency that we've added. Next, we can add development dependencies. So let's try to do that. So I'm going to add nodemon, since it's basically used for development. I'm going to add nodemon to our project. So let's do npm install nodemon, but I'm going to add this flag here to specify that I want this dependency to be added into the development dependency. So I use the D flag. All right, so once we do that, we have the dev dependencies, and of course, we have nodemon added to it. Okay, so now that we have a fundamental knowledge about dependencies and how you can add different dependencies in package.json, let's move on to something else. Next, we have the engine property. So the engine property specifies the versions of Node.js and npm required to run the project or the different packages that we've added. Okay, so sometimes you might build a project and you want that project to run on a certain version of Node.js or a specific version of npm package. Okay, so you can specify that using the engine property. So let's try that. All right, so here we have engines, and here we specify, put this in quotes, we specify node, and we want this package or this project to use Node.js version, let's do greater or equals to version 10.0.0. Okay, so you can leave it like this. So basically what will happen is that anytime we want to test run this project, the Node.js that is installed in our system must be greater or equals to version 10.0.0. Okay, so we can specify npm as well by saying npm. All right, so we can also say greater than, let's say 6.0.0. All right, so here, like we already know, it's going to make use of the npm version that we have on our system, and it's always going to check to make sure that the version matches what we specified here. All right, so that is what the engine does. Next, we have repository. The repository property specifies the repository where the package source code is hosted. Okay, so this has to do with Git and GitHub, or maybe any version control systems that you are using. So here you can specify the URL to where this source code is hosted. Now this code is going to be hosted on my GitHub page so that you can have access to it publicly, and I can as well specify the URL right now. So to do that, I will type repository, and I will specify the URL. So I'll say http://github.com, then my name and the name of this project. So this is going to be npm lessons. I hope so. Okay, so we can say .git. All right, so you can basically just copy this URL once you've created this repository on your GitHub page and specify it right here. This is just demo, and I'm not even sure if this is going to be the name. All right, so moving on, we have the next thing. Okay, so you can as well make this repository an object by adding this, okay, and then making this the URL. Let's say this URL. And of course, let's specify that this is going to be Git and not Subverb or any other version control system. All right. Or we can follow this pattern, or we can use the former one that I specified. Next, we have the private property. Now, if you set the private property to true, it prevents the package from being published to npm registry. Okay, so npm registry is where we have public packages that you can install and make use of in your project. All right, so sometimes you might want to develop this package to be internal and you don't want to share it publicly, so you can make that private by saying private true, and this package is going to be what? Private. So what that simply means is that you won't be able to publish this package on the public npm registry. All right, so that was quite simple. So next, we have the config property, which allows you to define custom configuration settings for your package. For example, you can specify the port number and the API URL. So let's learn how to do that. So here we can say config, and in here we can specify port, which is 8080. And next you can of course specify different properties right here. It doesn't have to be, it can be user defined properties so that you can make use of them within your application. So I can define API URL, assuming this is front end and you're connecting to a backend API. Okay, so I can say http Node.js localhost 900/API/v1/. All right. So we can have this, and let's assume that is the base API to our backend. Okay, so we can have as many config as possible, and we are not only limited to what we have here. So you can specify different properties, and that should be in line with the config property. So moving on, we have the paired dependencies property. So the paired dependencies property specifies dependencies that the package consumer must install. So for example, you might build a system or an application that requires a specific package. So you can't run the application without these packages being installed in your application. So you can specify using the paired dependency property that the user or the consumer of this application or this package must install these different dependencies or packages. So let's look at how we can implement that. So moving down here, let's bring paired dependencies. All right, so let's look at some of the dependencies that we really need. So first, of course, we need Express framework. So let's specify that. And let's put in a minimum version of what we already have here. Okay, so of course, we are going to make use of lots of packages, but some of them are not really required. So if we need a required dependency, we must specify them under paired dependencies. So we are using Express here just to show you an example Of course, there are other packages that you might want to add right here. All right, so that is peer dependencies. So let's move on to the next one. So next we have browsers list property. The browsers list property specifies the target browsers and Node.js version for which the package that you're building or the project that you're building is compatible. So we can specify that we want Google Chrome so version to be able to make use of these projects that we are building, or we can specify that we want Safari or Edge browser to make use of these projects that we are building. Okay, so to do that, we need to call the browsers list. All right, so here you can specify how you want your browsers to be supported. For example, you can say that I want this package to be supported in all browsers that has 2.5% global usage. In production and in development, I want this package to be supported in, let's say, 10.5% global usage. So you can do all this kind of logic to determine the best possible browser that your package or your project is going to support. And for example, let's look at what we have here. All right, so I just paste in some of the most used properties of the browsers list object. So here I'm trying to say that in production, I want the project to support browsers with a global usage of more than 0.2%, and then excluding any browser that are considered dead or that uses the opt mini rendering engine. So you can specify different things that you don't want, and by so doing, you can literally avoid browsers that do not support some of the packages that you have used in your application,